recording now. We also have the chat, which is open. And I am seeing, yes, that is a John Starks jersey in my background. So great, great talking point for me. It's one of the reasons why it's there. But the chat is open, so if you do have questions, please feel free to post them in the chat. I do believe, Lo, we're going to do a Q&A at the end, right? Or we will have the opportunity for Q&A at the end. So at the end, there will be a Q&A, so you'll be able to come off mute, ask questions, or post those into the chat. So feel free to do that. But from here, what I will do is before we jump into the actual presentation, I'm going to pass it off to Jonathan. He's going to say a couple things, and then we will pass it over to Lola for the change management presentation.
Awesome. Thanks, RJ. Welcome, everybody, team members from Walgreens. WGU and Walgreens embarked on a partnership back in January of 2022. So it's been a little over a year. We feel like this relationship continues to grow and develop and evolve. I thoroughly enjoy working with the people in HR from your corporate headquarters, and really appreciate their continued support in the webinars that we've been presenting to team members throughout the country. So I'm really excited about this particular topic. I think it's a topic that is going to be chock full of excellent information. So if there are any questions from the team members regarding WGU, our programs, our certificate programs, anything like that, feel free to send me a message. I'll also put my email information in the chat, so you can send me an email as well at your convenience. So I'll turn it over to Lola.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jonathan. Just wanted to say hello, everyone, and happy Thursday to you all. My name is Lola Clayton. I'm a career advisor here at WGU. Have a fantastic topic that we're going to discuss today. It's about change management, ways to welcome new business processes, new business solutions and opportunities. So please, any questions that you have, feel free to toss them into the chat. I'm happy to answer and respond to them. And throughout the presentation time, I'll probably take just a few seconds through a couple of the slides because they are rather informative. Change management is just a topic that is full of life and very fruitful in content. So I will pause throughout our different segments and just answer any questions that you may have, but I'm happy to also answer them at the end. So don't feel free to hold on to any questions that you have. All right, just wanted to keep in mind that feel free throughout the presentation to make yourself comfortable, move around, stretch, take notes if you like. Just wanted to make sure that your individual and personal needs are priority and at the forefront. But by all means, make sure you're on mute. And just a friendly reminder that this presentation is being recorded. Any questions outside of the presentation that you may have or that you would like to have responded to that you don't want to include in the chat, please feel free to email us at the email address that you see on the screen. You can address it to me if you like. The question will come directly, will come to our group, and then, but if you address it to me, it will be sent to me. So if you have any type of question that you would like addressed outside of the presentation, please let us know. We'll go ahead and launch into our agenda, which is going to look a little like this. We'll talk about defining change management. There are quite a few definitions about what is change. And I've heard some say, well, when you introduce change management, that means the entire business process is going to change. And now I got to learn something new. And sometimes introducing change into a flow that has been a routine has different emotions. Sometimes it's welcomed and sometimes there's apprehension. But we'll talk about first defining exactly what change management is. We'll talk a little bit about change management and organization success, as well as potential conflict. Steps of change management that have been known and utilized by other companies. We'll talk a little bit about how to adapt to change at your level. So if you are maybe in an entry level, a leadership level, or at a executive level, just how to adapt to change and how to influence and help others adapt to change as well. The other part we want to touch on is managing resistance. Again, there are some highs and lows and some different styles of emotions that are embraced and encountered when change of business processes are introduced into the workforce. So how can you manage that? How can a leader or even a representative manage resistance? And then, of course, questions. And then I will make sure I show a slide where the reference of the content. So as we go on to identify and define what change management is, we talk a little bit about management of change can be the development within a business or a similar organization. So change is human, constant, as has been mentioned over 20 centuries ago, but there was a Greek scholar and his name is Heraclitus. I had to take my time with that name. And he talked about and predicted that the breaking of change would occur not only through just as humans, but also through technology. And when I think of things, particularly technology, I think of some simple things that we use every day, and I think about change. Now, I started driving, maybe about 20 years ago, and there was a cassette tape deck where you put your cassette tape in. And then maybe 5 years later, there was a CD player that you plugged into the cigarette lighter. So now I get into my car and I just connect my phone and then the music just starts playing. So those are just some simple things that has changed throughout the years, and maybe you all can resonate with that. Even our homes, when we enter our homes, most of the time we have keys to enter, but now they have where you can punch in a code and unlock your door. So all of those change and business processes started very small with just a company or organization or an idea at a table where someone said, how about we try this? Or even our cell phones, right, have changed. There was the flip phone, there was no camera if you date back a few years ago. So change management has occurred even through some of the most simplest and smallest things that we utilize each and every day. The other thing about change is the control, identification, and implementation of required changes within a computer system. So again, technology evolves so fast and it becomes obsolete simply overnight. So that forces the world of work in which we all utilize to adapt to new technology, to new ways of working, to new ways of interacting. When I was putting together this content, I just thought to myself about all the changes that within my professional career have migrated through. And maybe some of you can resonate with it as well. When I worked in a hotel, we used to do carbon copy for a credit cards. Now you just tap your phone. So many changes have evolved throughout many different business processes. And if you have any that you'd like to share, please feel free to toss them in the chat. Those were just some that I thought of as I thought about how business evolved and technology has helped us to evolve as professionals today. 4 reasons why change is crucial to company success. Well, as we can see, these key reasons for change management is really important for organizational success because 1, it helps to increase employee engagement and satisfaction. 2, change management helps to navigate an organization's transition. Where they were yesterday is not where they want to be tomorrow or even the year, the future year into that. Number 3, so that a company can feel engaged with changes. And then 4, being made and being able to better adjust to them and to adjust to their clients and to have a product that's more easily accessible to their client, to their customer, but first and foremost to their employee, and to make sure that the employee has the knowledge needed to be able to embrace change. So these are 4 crucial reasons why change is important, and not only just important, but effective within an organization. There are different types of change management that is out there. So there is developmental, there's transitional, and of course, there's transformational change. And so change often comes in stages. Maybe you've heard of maybe a pilot, so where they just use a certain group when they're introducing a change just to see how it works and use that group to provide feedback or to work through any obstacles or any hiccups. So that's really developmental change. And then maybe they roll it out into tier 2, right? So change can be introduced into different levels. So tier 2 would be the transitional change. So we've worked through our any obstacles or complex situations with tier 1. So tier 2, we're transitioning. Let's see what happens to a larger group. And then transformational is when it's introduced to a wider group. So understanding and recognizing these different kinds of change requires different strategies, different plans to gain engagement. It also helps to reduce resistance, which is why it's broken into different tiers: tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. I've seen some go up as far as to tier 7. And this also helps to ease acceptance. The main thing about introducing change management into different organizations is the training, having the proper training on deck and provided so that employees can go through each tier and each level of the management business process at ease. So I've went through about 3 or 4 slides so far right now. Going to take a quick pause here. Any questions so far? All right. Now I would like to introduce the 7 steps of change. So we've talked about a few things. We talked about the 4 introductions to change management. We talked about the 3 steps and 3 levels of change. Now is 7 steps of change management and exactly what that is. So you want to think of employees as customers too. Change is new for them. You're breaking the routine. This is something new that they're being introduced to. And so with that, if you look at an internal customer, an internal employee as a customer, that will help you to be able to see how would the customer react. And even though this is an employee that is going to be using the change each and every day, or maybe it affects their daily workforce or the daily routine of their work, then if you kind of switch roles as a manager or as a leader and look at the employee as a customer, then that'll help you kind of figure out and problem solve and also be ready to provide solutions so you can be more proactive versus reactive to anything that may promote an obstacle or present a challenge. You also want to focus on communication. So let there be a two-way exchange of communication. If something is working well, great. You want to know all about that. And most of the time during that transition or that transformational or developmental stage of change, that focus on communication is key. It's important because it's going to help to be successful in the next tier level. So you definitely want to focus on communication. Step 3, you want to leverage any technology that's within the training plan or within the announcement. So our technology is definitely going to be helpful. Any type of training documents or e-learning, or even if you're rolling out an actual training class, that's going to be extremely helpful to set all employees at ease and also help them to feel equipped, knowledgeable, and confident about the change that has been presented. You want to have access to the technical side of the change. So that if that means working with the vendor, so that if changes need to be made within the organization or to better suit the organization and the product and the customer, then you want to make sure you have that access. You want to lean on any artificial intelligence or automation to help de-stress the process if possible. You also want to, at every step and every level and every tier, foster feedback to help loop in and fill in any gaps. This is such a great example written here as the architect is putting together the design of change management. And so mobilizing the leaders is really important, making sure they understand and that they are ready to accept the change and everyone's on the same page. Then prepare the workforce. As you do that, you engage the shareholders of what is happening, and that's where that feedback, that focus on communication is, and to help close that loop of anything that may not be working well. The transition of the change, and then what's really crucial is managing the risk, and that will help to improve performance. And as we round out and come to the 7th step of our change management, we want to celebrate and reinforce any change. Sometimes change is not always easy to introduce. Sometimes the timeline and the deadline is really short. The time may not always be on your side. So introducing something really quickly, and if the company and the workforce is able to embrace it, celebrate that and reinforce how important the change is. When you think about overcoming change management, we talked a little bit in the introduction about the highs and lows, the different emotions that it will invite. Then there are 3 main steps that you can think of as a leader, or again, whatever level that you're on, of how you can overcome that change. Be very clear. So when you saw in our graphic, we talked about mobilizing the leaders. We talked about informing the workforce. So be very clear of what the expectation is, what the results are intended to be, even if it's current results, so short-term results as well as long-term. Be very compelling, have great energy, feel excited and energized about the change that's being introduced, and also be credible. If it's something that you know, great. If it's something you're unclear of and you're working through it as well, let that be known. That'll also help the internal customer or the employee be at ease as well. We all are learning and we all are human. So change is definitely going to help us and be incredible. Understand that I don't know it all, but I do know most things. So being credible is definitely going to be helpful. When you think about adapting to change and some key crucial elements to help adapt to change, you want to think about creating a sense of urgency. And in that creation of urgency, again, we got to decide what the time factor is. So if it is a short time factor where you have to have a product rolled out right away, then that sense of urgency is definitely going to be key. But if you have some time to roll out, again, if it's a different tier level, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and time is on your side, you still want to create that sense of urgency to understand and also to train and to learn and realize that something new is coming about. So helping the workforce and the internal employees to understand that. Build a coalition is definitely going to be helpful. You can identify different leaders within a company that can establish an alliance. And the aim here is going to be to bring together people who can share the same vision in order to involve them in the change process. And so when you have a group together, so I think the saying is, it takes a village, I've heard before. So when you have a village and a group together that builds that coalition, that also one creates that sense of urgency and understands what the end goal and the long-term and short-term results are of change, then that'll be helpful as well to involve everyone and to make the process very easy. If you create a roadmap, that will be helpful to reduce resistance within the organization. It's also essential to establish a way forward, a way to move forward for everyone. The path must be easy to communicate. So that communication path, that exchange should be very easy to understand and to remember. So communicate effectively. And then that will help. The roadmap must be transmitted persistently. So keep that roadmap in front, at the forefront, so everyone knows where we're going, different steps throughout the process. And most importantly, within that roadmap, it's always essential to respond honestly so that you can set aside any doubts or any fears that may be raised by the members of the organization or of your team that will be affected by the change. Another great key is to remove any barriers. So once the majority of the members are convinced of the benefits of the change that is up and coming, it will be time to make an effective and to detect possible barriers at the organizational level as they arise. So again, you have your roadmap, you have great communication, communicate effectively, remove any barriers that may be put in front of you. Therefore, and you're able to detect them and forecast any barriers that there may be. You can set them aside and you can crush any doubts that are within the organization. And building that coalition together, that's going to be really helpful, because sometimes it takes more than one person to be able to see any doubts or any fears that are out there. So that coalition is definitely a key element, especially when it comes to step 5, removing those barriers. Change can be a long process, and it's not without any difficulties at all. So therefore, the best way to maintain motivation is by setting short-term goals and allow progress to be observed. So you definitely want to ensure short-term wins. We talked a little bit about congratulating them, reinforcing them, celebrating those short-term wins. As you celebrate the short-term ones, once you hit the long-term ones, it'll be smooth sailing. You also want to build on change. The roadmap is not going to be monolithic, but it can be revised during the process so that neither small wins are seen as final success steps. And then that will prevent any failures to leading to frustration. And then anchor the change in the company. Once the change has been brought about, the time comes to consolidate it and make it a part of the company culture. So in this way, this is how change develops and is embraced throughout the organization. So quite a few steps so far that we've encountered. Of course, again, our four ways of why change is important are 3 steps of what change is, our graphic that we had about change, and then here are our keys to adapting to change. And so these keys are going to be important to us because this is what resistance can potentially look like. So change is great, but again, it comes and it goes with all different types of emotions. So sometimes resistance can look like bad communication strategy. It could look a little bit of like shock or fear of the unknown. It could look a little bit like empathy or peer pressure, like the internal employees are forced to embrace it. Poor timing, lack of trust and support from the leadership. That's where being credible, concise, and confident is going to be important. Lack of confidence or competence, I'm sorry, related to the change that's brought about. Office politics is also an option when it comes to what resistance can look like. And again, that's where that building a coalition can be helpful. That coalition is going to be invested into the change, invested into what those short-term and those long-term goals are. Maybe you yourself have encountered change before, if not with this current organization, maybe one previously. And there's always sometimes naysayers, or there's always, once the change has been brought about, those that say, well, you know what, it's not quite that bad, or, you know, this is okay. So building that coalition, having effective communication, making sure you mobilize the leaders, building that coalition are all great ways to band together to prevent any type of resistance. I'll pause here for any questions, comments, or relevant testimonials. So as we move forward, we'll talk a little bit about steps to managing resistance. So here are a few steps in which you can identify the root causes for the resistance. So in our previous slide, we talked about what resistance could look like: office politics, lack of communication, things of that nature. But you can involve senior leaders to help. And if you don't want to move it to the senior leadership level, then that coalition of building a great coalition or a strong group of employees that embrace the change. And sometimes that's the tier 1 group. Sometimes that tier 1 group has seen it from the beginning, from the initial phase. And so they themselves have welcomed it. They understand the process. They've worked through any complex obstacles that may encounter. So if possible, use that lean into that tier 1 leadership, or lean into the senior leaders if you have to when embracing change. Of course, communicating the change, reiterate the positive at all times and at all steps and all levels, and share previous success stories of change. When I was putting together this presentation, there are so much information and content out there about successful change operations, whether it was a small company or a large company. So sharing previous success stories is going to be helpful at all levels. When you identify the root cause of resistance to change, leaders tend to manage resistance by responding to what they observe, or different symptoms, or sometimes even employee complaints. Sometimes this results in lower meeting attendance or employees just simply shutting down. And so we definitely we don't want that to happen, or we don't want that to occur. So that's where that communication definitely comes helpful. And that's where constantly reiterating the positive is going to be a great step to managing resistance. And so that pretty much brings us a conclusion to our slides. That moved rather quickly. I do want to just kind of go back and take a few minutes to just look at this slide. I think this is the great part to, or the core nucleus to the steps about change. These 7 steps, if ever you find yourself in a situation where change is being presented in your organization, this is the key focus. These are the key things that you want to remember at any level that you are working at. So always think of the employees as the customer, and make sure you build on the positive, have a coalition, and you celebrate and reinforce any change. So that moved rather quickly. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing the presentation, and Jonathan or RJ, I'm going to turn it back over to you to open it up and see if we have any questions from the audience. And if there's no questions right now, I'm also going to put in my email address in the chat. If anyone has any questions directly just for me about the content.
If anyone does have questions, you can take yourself off mute. So if you do have questions, come off mute, or you can post them into the chat.
Hi,
think
so
Jonathan is talking, but we can't hear him.
yeah, John, you're on mute.
There we go. Sorry about that. Would also love to get anybody's feedback on the topic, on the content. If anyone's brave enough to come off mute and share that, we'd love to hear it.
I was actually gonna Rosie here with Walgreens Corp. I really enjoyed and I'm very visual, so I appreciate all the graphs and the visual. So that's really great for my brain. But I mean, we're going through a lot of transformation and transition right now, and I'm in a highly supportive role as an EA, and I guess just feedback on this and a struggle to put out there, and I don't know if you could speak to it or if anybody else can commiserate. Sometimes when you're in those roles, you want to build up folks, build community, and also are in a bit of a precarious situation where you're support and you know there's a lot of confidentiality and like confidence that you have to keep through a lot of that because there's just so much that goes into change a lot of the time, but also trying to effectively build community and wondering what have been successful active tactics, I guess, that have been taken in that way. I know for me, joining BRGs and actively seeking out one-on-ones with people has been a way, but if there's others, tangible ways that people have demonstrated that or had success with that.
Thank you, Rosie, for sharing that. I really appreciate it. And you're right, confidentiality is definitely important because particularly with the rollout and certain change, you can't share everything directly right at once. But in that communication portion of it, where I was referencing in some of the slides, that does look like what you referenced, a one-on-one. Some may have fears where they may share with other employees at their peer level that they may not share with a senior level leader or with a mid management level leader. And so just being proactive, I think maybe is one of the best ways to help isolate and de-stress any fears and doubts that are out there, is having those one-on-one conversations and being prepared. So that being proactive and being prepared, that they will come. There will be those obstacles. There will be someone that's going to be resistant or a group that's going to be resistant to change, and being prepared to tackle that as much as you can, but still balancing that tightrope of being confidential within what the company's ultimate goal is. So thank you for sharing that. Thanks for coming off mute too.
Anyone else have any thoughts or comments, or maybe some other examples of how, you've been able to make it through some sort of change management? I think probably almost everybody on this call has had to experience some sort of change management during our careers. And it's not always easy. Sometimes it can be a lot of challenges and obstacles to overcome. So if anybody else on the call has some words of wisdom for the group, we'd love to hear it.
I know Rosie did mention in the chat virtual coffee with some people. This is where team builders are really important as well. So there's different ways to develop that communication and set a foundation for that communication. And sometimes a team builder, something outside, if possible, the actual work environment is definitely helpful. I know Rosie put in the chat, keeping things loose, and that allows you to appear as a human versus a leader. And so if there are any resistance to change that's happening, that different environment will help internal employees to just feel comfortable in expressing that. And then that'll also give you some idea of how the company can combat that. Because if one is thinking it, then maybe others are too. So you can go ahead and set some sort of baseline of how to be encouraging and being positive with the change. So thank you so much, Rosie.
One thing I found too is really just sharing your own fears as well and being vulnerable. Kind of like keeping things loose, like she was saying, but really just showing you're human and that you have some of those same fears really opens up the space for them to be able to be vulnerable and honest, themselves.
Absolutely. Thank you. In that same context of being vulnerable, sharing the long-term goal and behind that for the overall organization is definitely helpful in just maintaining that positivity. Sometimes we have to tell ourselves that if we have inner resistance to what's happening, but there is a long-term goal that sometimes we just can't see. We understand what is out there and what's predicted to happen, but maybe we just can't visualize it first. And so just being able to share how effective and how positive that long-term goal will help the overall organization, maybe more customers, maybe increase sales, maybe increase marketing and exposure, just some those short-term wins to help us understand that it's going to take short-term wins to get to long-term goals. So you are exactly right. Being vulnerable is helpful. Thank you for sharing that.
Awesome. RJ, any last comments?
Just a reminder that this was recorded, so we will be sharing that out. So if you do want to go back and reference anything from the presentation, feel free to do that. We'll send that recording out, and so that way you're able to go back and review any of the material that was covered. But thank you, Jonathan, for making this connection. Thank you, Lola, for jumping in and presenting on such a valuable topic. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today.
Yes.
Guys, great session.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, RJ. And thank you, team, for your
Welcome.
time and attention. Have a great day.
Take care.
Take care.